From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Camila Escalante. Thousands of people are in the streets of central Caracas to celebrate what they say is a victory over the attack on the electrical system. United Socialist Party leader Dario Vivas said that the mobilization called for all Bolivarian people to come together. President Nicolas Maduro has ordered the creation of a command to defend basic state services.
We are triumphing over the attacks of that fascist right wing. We are triumphing over that coup d'etat on electricity. We are showing that we are sovereigns who will not surrender to any empire, and that we are convinced that this government is led by the people.
Every minute of peace Venezuela has is a triumph for the revolution and a defeat for the American empire that burns in desires, because here we are killing each other.
And a festive atmosphere could be found just 2 blocks away from the march at Plaza Venezuela as residents congregated for outdoor dancing. And the opposition rallied in the city of Valencia in the central state of Carabobo, with opposition leader Juan Guaidó taking part in the march. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan armed forces held civic military exercises to protect utility services such as electricity and water. Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Pedrino Lopez said that the people must be united against these attacks.
The goal of this civic military action is to organize people, authorities and the military to all work together. This is not an issue only for the people or only for the military to get involved with. We have to get organized and all work together. President Nicolas Maduro has called everyone. He says this is a civic military union to fight against imperialism. There is not another way but to fight together.
A mass mobilization was held in Washington to reject United States attacks on Venezuela. People from across the country traveled to join the growing anti-war movement, which demonstrated in front of the White House. Representatives of social movements and high-profile peace activists spoke at the rally.
To tell Trump, who was at the White House, that this movement has just begun and that people are becoming more and more aware of another dangerous war against Venezuela this time. And we're going to be marching, we're going to have a forum and teach-in. We're beginning a new campaign across this country to have teach-ins in dozens of cities and to keep moving until the people of this country stand up to stop the U.S. war drive, the sanctions, the coup attempt.
The U.S. has waged political and economic war on Venezuela for 20 years since Hugo Chavez was elected, and the war is intensifying even this week with sanctioning of MasterCard and Visa being proposed. This is an attack on all levels of Venezuelan society, and one thing that I showed was the irony that the upper classes are in favor of sanctions and in favor of military intervention and are calling on the U.S. to invade their country as a last resort because they've lost the streets.
And our correspondent Alina Duarte also spoke with Venezuelans at the march.
When the humanitarian aid or so-called humanitarian aid was trying to enter our country, that could have been an awful and, terrorific situation. And thank God, because of our people and the consciousness of our people, nothing that was that horrible happened. But you have the New York Times three weeks later basically rewriting history, very convenient, 3 weeks later, and saying, yes, there wasn't as peaceful as they were showing us. I hope that the next events that happen in Venezuela don't need to have the New York Times and don't need to wait 3 weeks or more or longer to tell us what's happening.
More from Alina Duarte in Washington in this report.
Hundreds of protesters from all over the U.S. gathered today in front of the White House here in Washington, D.C. to demand no coup, no war, no sanctions on Venezuela, and to show support for Venezuela President Nicolás Maduro against U.S. efforts for a regime change. Dozens of national organizations like Answer Coalition, Code Pink, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and activists demanded Donald Trump's administration to stop economic and financial sanctions against Venezuela. After a rally in front of the White House, people took the principal streets of D.C. to let the U.S. citizens principally know about the consequences of the sanctions imposed against Venezuela. Also, there was a rally of the Venezuelan opposition also at the White House. The police had to intervene to avoid any possibility of confrontation. The rally in support of the Bolivarian Revolution became a meeting this afternoon to analyze the next steps these organizations will take to stop a coup in Venezuela.
That was Alina Duarte in Washington. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa has staged a picket outside of the U.S. consulate in Sandown. The Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party and the Socialist Party of Zambia joined other left-wing organizations against U.S. interference attempts in Venezuela. They said that the goal of the U.S. is to wipe out the Bolivarian Revolution and erase the positive contribution of former President Hugo Chavez, who they said improved the lives of working-class majority and the poor. And organizations in Equatorial Guinea also came together in a show of solidarity for the people of Venezuela. They rejected what they call a permanent aggression against the Latin American country and condemned the recent sabotage on its electrical system. They also gave a salute to the heroic people for having overcome the constant attacks.
We in Equatorial Guyana support Venezuela so that there is peace. We send our solidarity.
I fully support the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. They want to destabilize the country and we condemn those actions. Venezuelans support their government and we hope they keep their strength. We don't want war in Venezuela.
The author of the New Zealand Christchurch mosque massacre has been charged with 1 count of murder as the country announces a gun reform bill. Brenton Tarrant was arrested on Friday after attacking 2 mosques, leaving 50 people dead and hundreds more injured. Further charges are expected to be filed against him. Prime Minister Ardern confirmed that Tarrant owned 5 guns and said, quote, "Our gun laws will change." And people are mourning the victims of Friday's hate crime, while others are sharing their survival stories. Most of the victims were migrants or refugees from countries such as Pakistan, India, Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey, Somalia, and Afghanistan.
It's very sad, the whole situation. It seems like, it's a pin drop silence, environment. And all the hustle and bustle of Christchurch is dead, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's not a good feeling.
When I start hearing the shooting, it took me five seconds to get it through my head that it was a shooting. So then when I start running to the door on the left of the mosque or the main hall, I ran away to the back of the mosque, hide behind cars.
Meanwhile, people around the world are showing their solidarity with the victims of these hate crimes. Around 200 Turks held symbolic funeral prayers in Istanbul outside of the Hagia Sophia Museum.
If Muslims stand in solidarity, they cannot carry out attacks like that against us. But if Muslims are not organized, they can attack us like they did. Therefore, we will remain united. We will look after each other.
Hundreds took to the streets of Athens, Greece, to demonstrate against racism. Demonstrators stressed the importance of uniting for peace and marched together in support of the Muslim community.
This Islamophobic crime has woken up the consciousness of the whole planet. So we're demonstrating all around the world. We say no racism, no fascism.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute.
The life is full of moments. moments of fight, moments of hope, moments that transcend, moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Hundreds of Venezuelans are returning to their country from Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. They're going back thanks to the Venezuelan government's Return to the Homeland program. Almost 200 people are returning from Peru and at least 130 from Ecuador. According to the Venezuelan government, at least 13,000 people have returned home since the program began in August 2018.
These plans helps a lot of Venezuelans like me because people who have left the country have found difficulties with finding jobs and with visa procedures. Sometimes people don't want to hire us Venezuelans, so we have also problems with that. This plan is good because it makes it easier for the people who want to return like us to go back home for free.
I'm going back because my son is there. I'm going back with my daughter-in-law and my 3 grandchildren. My son got a job in Venezuela, and now we are going to reunite there.
And some of those who have returned to Venezuela have found themselves living a normal life following a difficult time abroad. Eliezer was one of the people who returned from Peru, where he migrated in 2018. He decided to go back to his family after spending his time working more than 12 hours a day in different jobs. Now he's a music teacher and says that he hopes his work can contribute to build a better future in his country.
There are many Venezuelans in Peru and most of us were in Lima. There were some jobs for us, but very limited. The things my children say to me, such as "Hi Dad," "Morning," "Good night," and "How was school today?" they are all invaluable, more valuable than anything I have bought them.
Brazil's first trans state congresswoman has been sworn in. This historic moment was celebrated by a crowd that paraded through the streets of Sao Paulo. Our correspondent, Brian Meir, has the story.
On opening day of São Paulo's 2019 state legislature, a crowd of supporters of Brazil's first trans state congresswoman, Erica Malunguinho, gathers to dance and march with her into the state capitol building on her first day of work.
This moment is important because people who have been silenced throughout Brazilian history have gained a voice, the trans and black population. And I believe that it is a moment to celebrate our ancestors and our victory, and to understand that our space has come from far back. There is a story that was built which brought us here, and from this point forward, this story will be constructed in the first person.
Eric is a member of the Socialism and Liberty Party, PSOL, the same party that slain city councilwoman Marielle Franco belonged to. As the procession nears its destination, supporters of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro begin to heckle the crowd.
This is not a madhouse, okay?
As they near the Capitol building, Erica stops the procession and explains her mission.
It's culture, it's politics, and it's people who are black.
Brazil's first ever trans state lawmaker walks into Congress to get sworn in. Her supporters are directed into a hall to watch the event on TV, and as they hold up signs saying "Who killed Marielle Franco?" and "Black Lives Matter," fascists taunt them with screams of "I'd rather be dead than red," but this does nothing to dim the spirits of Erica's supporters.
This is a historic moment because it's a black trans woman from Pernambuco, and I'm very happy. It would have been unacceptable for me to stay at home like this. I am a black woman, a historian and a rapper, and I had to be there.
Brian Meir, Telesur, São Paulo.
Former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has sent a letter to the Lula Livre movement. Lula says he will keep fighting for the rights of the Brazilian people in times of threats from political and economic powers. Following 11 months in prison, Lula also says he will not stop until his innocence is proven. Thousands of people joined a meeting called by the Free Lula movement to support the former Brazilian president. At the gathering in Sao Paulo, participants discussed strategies to fight for Lula's freedom and to fight what they call a political persecution. Security forces in Colombia have used repressive tactics against campesinos in the Cauca Valley, in the department of the southeast of the country. Campesinos and indigenous people denounced being attacked as they held an assembly and said that security forces fired tear gas and burned down their camp. Leaders are defending their right to own land and are urging the government so that a meeting can be held with President Iván Duque.
En el campamento de los campesinos, aquí en el Cairo Cajibío, informamos en directo.
We want to denounce that despite the fact that we were 2 kilometers away from the Pan-American Highway, security forces burst into our assembly and destroyed our camp, our food, all the things we had. People were injured. All the families are scared. There were children there. We urge human rights organizations to protect our human rights. Security forces keep attacking us.
A Peruvian indigenous community has now blocked a road for 40 days in protest against a copper mining company. The community said that the government illegally transformed a road that crossed onto their land into a national route, which was used by the mining company Las Bambas. Protesters want to reach an agreement with the company to use that road. Talks between authorities and the community, which were scheduled for this Saturday, have been postponed. More than 2,000 families in Paraguay have been placed in shelters after heavy rains destroyed their homes. The National Emergency Services reported that heavy rains caused rivers to burst, flooding the central regions of the country. The cities of Limpio y Ramacito have been the most affected by this emergency. The government of the Dominican Republic has assured citizens that it will provide an adequate water supply amid a devastating drought. Officials said that drinking water is guaranteed, but announced that farmers are not to plant new crops until water stocks recover. Government ministers met in the capital, Santo Domingo, on Friday to coordinate strategies as the country grapples with a major drought.
Water for human consumption is guaranteed. We have restrictions in some reservoirs for irrigation. That is why we are bringing this to the attention of the Water Board, so that they can immediately collect their harvest and not to start a new crop until authorization is received from authorities that guarantees water.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Yellow Vest protesters were out in Paris once again in demonstrations marking 4 months since they began the movement. 10,000 people gathered in the capital to protest against the high cost of living. Demonstrators lobbed cobblestone at riot police through clouds of tear gas in front of the Arc de Triomphe. The Interior Minister said almost 100 people had been arrested. Elsewhere in France, protests were estimated to have 4,500 people.
The ultimatum is that we have issued our grievance, made all our demands, and actually we said that we were not here. We got only violence in return. There have been 13 dead and thousands injured. It's the only dialogue we had in response.
A tropical storm has killed at least 24 people in eastern Zimbabwe and 19 in neighboring Mozambique. Around 40 people are still missing in Zimbabwe. Floods across Mozambique had already killed 70 people before the storm's arrival. Authorities from both countries fear the death toll will rise. Cyclone Idai also left the region without power. Investigators are studying Ethiopia's jet cockpit voice recorder to find out what caused the Boeing 737 MAX 8 to crash, killing 157 people. The spokesperson from the investigation agency said that downloading the data from the retrieved recorder would take 4 to 5 hours. DNA tests of the victims' remains could take up to 6 months. Hundreds of thousands of people protested in Algiers on Friday in what is considered to be the biggest demonstration against President Bouteflika. Protesters poured into the streets chanting slogans against the president's 20-year rule. Protests also took place in different cities of the country. But on Monday, Bouteflika reversed the decision to stand for another term after weeks of demonstrations. But people are enraged over delayed elections and accuse him of illegally extending his term.
We are here to say enough is enough. Everyone loves Algeria. It belongs to us all, but we do not have access to Algeria. It's always reserved. It's not normal, whether it is the beaches, the administrations. Why do our children leave when we have everything we need here?
We will make them all leave, everyone. There will be none left. Look at us. We have nothing. No work, no housing. We want to get married, and there is nothing. They took everything, I swear.
Another building has collapsed in the Nigerian city of Abadan, in which people have sustained injuries. According to eyewitnesses, the building, which is still under construction, collapsed suddenly, trapping many who were in the building. 4 people have been rescued so far, while an unknown number of people remain trapped in the debris. The incident comes 3 days after a similar incident at a school in the country claimed 20 lives. This week marks 8 years since the war in Syria began. Our correspondent, Hisham Wamouz, brings us more from Damascus.
15th of March marks the 8th anniversary of the war imposed by the United States on Syria, an unprecedented war that, apart from causing brutal attacks, has almost wiped out the local economy and the infrastructure. This is a deadly invasion promoted by the United States, Israel, the EU, and especially France and the United Kingdom, and the oil monarchies. This has caused the death of around 500,000 people, according to UN reports. It also forced almost half of the Syrian population to run away from their homes. 6 million people have been displaced within the country, and around 5 million left the country. Nowadays, there is more than 1.5 million people who voluntarily returned to their region after the liberation of almost 96% of the Syrian territory carried out by the Syrian army and its Russian, Iranian, and Lebanese allies, who fought against the occupation of Hezbollah. More than 1,400 areas were liberated, and 2,500 joined the National Reconciliation Program. Meanwhile, the militants keep control of only the northwestern region of Idlib, nearby the illegal US military base of Al-Tanf, close to the border with Jordan, and also a small area close to the Euphrates River. More than 100,000 militants who infiltrated the country from the western, southern, and eastern borders destroyed the majority of the archaeological areas and the country's infrastructure, apart from spreading violence and chaos, taking over the oil and gas fields, the phosphate mines, and the natural resources. More than 50 hospitals, 6,000 schools, and 10,000 industrial buildings were also destroyed or damaged. This worked along with a system of media misinformation through satellite and communication systems, and with the blockades imposed by the United States, the EU and their allies since 2011. This includes a total ban of 8 programs, any kind of funding, investments, and a list of sanctions of many Syrian leaders and representatives from 72 companies. This has caused economic losses of around $500 billion. Despite this, Syria showed its tenacious defense of sovereignty and independence. It ratifies its intention to negotiate a final solution based on respect of its territorial integrity. The military triumphs of the last years have been followed by high-level negotiations in Geneva and Sochi, looking for definitive peace for all actors involved, and the absolute right to peace and sovereignty of Syria. Some commercial negotiations with many countries have been considered in order to rebuild Syria, and the project for a new constitution has gained momentum. These are the issues supported and considered to be very important by the government. Syria has succeeded in the war against its territory. The challenge now is that the people should have proper infrastructure. Rebuilding infrastructure would cost around $40 billion, and around $200 billion more is required to restore the education and health system, public water services, and the agriculture.
That was Hisham Wanous in Damascus. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at tellusenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Their English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.
We have been present in all the events stirring our peoples.